What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. For thousands of North Korean soldiers, the prospect of deploying to the battlefields in Ukraine was initially packaged as a bizarre form of hope. They imagined stepping out of a life spent battling hunger and oppressive surveillance, a life where every scrap of food is rationed and every step is monitored. The regime back home never told them that this new opportunity would unravel into one of the bloodiest chapters of their existence. Yet, that's exactly what happened. In Russia, which has been increasingly desperate to plug the gaping holes in the military ranks, these North Koreans found themselves thrown into the deadliest front lines, with little more than ragged uniforms and a handful of untranslated commands. Ironically, their own country, North Korea, they once considered suffocating, now appears like a haven compared to the horrors of Ukraine. Today, let's talk about this questionable arrangement between Putin and Kim Jong-un. Do they care about such losses, or does it actually make them furious? Spoiler alert, Kim is most likely very unhappy about such use of North Koreans. And no, it is not because he feels bad for them losing their lives. No way, not at all. The real reason is something very different and dire. They say desperation can make you see a mirage in a desert. For thousands of young men from North Korea, that desert was their everyday reality. No food, no money, no freedom, and no future. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, came the promise of quote-unquote training in Russia. This was presented as a moment of salvation, a chance to taste a world beyond the militarized borders they had known since childhood. Little did they realize, they were merely swapping one authoritarian regime for another, probably even worse. Because as soon as they stepped out of their cage, they found themselves landing in a battlefield where their values as humans was measured in how many shells they could absorb before dying. In North Korea, at least, as long as they don't show themselves above other people and follow the order, at least they can preserve their lives. Not the best one, but a life nevertheless. The promise of eternal glory, the sacrifice for both Putin and Kim Jong-un, and a hot meal every day was really tempting for these people. And honestly guys, we will never understand them. The level of propaganda they have there is nowhere near close to what we have in the Western world or even in Russia. This is a whole new level. Generations of families lived and died under the same regime with complete lack of outside information. So we can blame them, we can make fun of them, but we will never truly understand them. So those things they were promised if they go fight Putin's war was the same as a promise to go to space for us, talk with aliens, and eat the food the flavor of which we could have never imagined. All that under the impression that your leader is a god among humans, and you're guaranteed a place in heaven after your sacrifice. And you obviously truly believe in all of this. Then there is a promise of $2,000 per month salary. For a person who could have been making $20 per month's salary, these are truly life-changing money. And of course, the illusion that North Korean army is the strongest in the world. The propaganda showed them as brave and unstoppable warriors who crushed their enemies. The state movies showed war heroes who single-handedly destroyed entire platoons and brigades of the enemy. Meaning that fighting in Ukraine side by side with such a powerful ally as Russia would be literally a walk in the park. Very high paid, very delicious, very rewarding walk in the park. So taking all of this into consideration, we might have a very, very small insight into the mindsets of those North Koreans who did decide to go fight in Ukraine. As a result, around 10 to 12,000 of them were crammed into the first deployment, complete with about 500 officers, a few top-tier generals, and elements of the so-called Storm Corps, troops who are supposedly among the regime's best. Or at least they are better fed than the rest. But in Russia that meant very little. Not even the Storm Corps could avoid the language barrier or the organizational chaos that would greet them on arrival. This was one of the very first immediate challenges that made so many of them perish in such a short period of time. Whether they enlisted willingly or were herded into planes and trains under the illusion of an escape, these soldiers soon realized they had stumbled into a nightmare. By the time many of them grasped the full scope of their destiny, it was already too late to turn back. And turn back where, exactly? Run away and hide back in North Korea? This surely means instant death, not just for you, but probably for your entire family as well. Once in Russia, the first obstacle these troops encountered was a giant language barrier. If some of them spoke at least the basics of English, this would have been obviously easier. Some words are so common and well known that you might need to know just a couple dozen of them to be able to have at least the very basic conversation. But Russians from distant regions trying to speak Korean, or North Koreans trying to speak Russian, that's absolutely hysterical combination. They could not even put their words into writing because even the alphabets are completely different. Reportedly, there was only one translator for every 30 soldiers, at least, which makes the basic communication almost comical. Well, except that there is nothing funny for those people when heavy artillery and bullets are flying overhead. Maybe somebody shouts "Огонь!", which is fire in Russian, and then somebody else shouts "Уйди!", as Russian for retreat. For North Korean soldiers, these words mean they sound almost exactly the same, especially in the heat of the battle. Assuming he was one of the few ones who knew at least a couple of words in Russian. Instead of clarity, they got confusion, and confusion in a war zone gets people killed. If that was not disorienting enough, most of these North Koreans had never left their country, never encountered terrain that's very open, and never faced a real foreign enemy. So they might think that walking in a group of 20 people in the open field is nothing. But, well, they immediately become a prime target for Ukrainian artillery. Ukraine's forces, 2 years into brutal combat, know exactly how to exploit these weaknesses. They see panicky soldiers, some hardly out of their teens, struggling to piece together confusing commands. They see an army that might have the discipline to perform synchronized parades and break bricks on state TV, but cannot coordinate on a real battlefield. Adds to that the outdated gear and Soviet-era rifles, and you have a bizarre, obviously, spectacle. One of the world's strictest dictatorships sending an unprepared, under-trained group to fight in a conflict light years ahead of them technologically. It's like telling a fisherman armed with a spear to take on a fleet of warships. The illusion of might presented in grand parades back home crumbles when confronted with high-end drones, mechanized brigades, and well-prepared Ukrainian trenches. The term cannon fodder is harsh, but it fits. It's what happens when a regime no longer cares if you live or die, as long as you manage to occupy the enemy's attention for a few extra seconds. And honestly, after almost 2 months since North Koreans joined Russians in Ukraine, it looks like that this, at least from the Putin side, this was exactly the goal of North Korean soldiers, the purpose of their existence. Just give the regular Russian army extra day or a week to regroup itself, prepare, and attack somewhere else. Putin's forces were already drained of manpower, so the sudden influx of bodies from North Korea could not have come at a better time for Kremlin. These young soldiers, for the most part, have no real combat experience beyond staged drills and grunt work like farming, digging ditches, or performing circus-like strength feats for propaganda. But now, they find themselves in Ukraine's hottest zones, where they are forced to figure out everything on the fly. At the same time, some of these men, barely out of their teens, are in terrible health, thanks to chronic diseases, parasites, and malnutrition they went through in North Korea. They arrived starved and anemic, only to be fed stories about dog meat rations supposedly intended to keep them combat ready. And I'm not even kidding here. It is a commonly known fact that some breeds of dog are considered food in North Korea. So, there are stories from the front lines that Russians were feeding their Asian comrades dog food, not the food made out of a dog. This is when the language barrier plays another crucial role. For the Russians, North Korean soldiers are just a temporary fix. Toss them into the front lines, let them soak up bullets, and keep more seasoned Russian soldiers out of the direct line of fire. Whether a single North Korean soldier makes it out alive or not hardly seems to register in Moscow's grand plan. Which now brings us to the second reason why the participation of North Koreans in this war is a complete disaster. They had absolutely no idea what real war is. They came unprepared, neither physically nor mentally. They thought that they will just pew-pew here and there, but ended up being hypnotized by a buzzing Ukrainian drone, which seemed like an unusual mechanical bird from the future, which ended up rapidly descending upon their mesmerized heads. Why would Kim Jong-un agree to all this? One of the answers is that he gets a foreign currency lifeline that props up his regime's crushed economy. In return, he sends thousands of his people to fight and die in a war that does not concern them. The outcome of the invasion will in no way affect North Korea. This war is about Putin's aggression in Ukraine, but for Kim, it is another page in the manual how to remain in power. Show unwavering support for your ally, reel in money, and maintain an iron grip back home by pushing the narrative that these soldiers are on a hero's mission. In fact, the news that thousands North Koreans vanished within weeks probably never even reached the country. There is a good chance that on state TV channels they talk about zero losses, that their North Koreans, side by side with Russians, are about to enter Kiev and execute Zelensky, Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz, Jens Stoltenberg and Ursula von der Leyen, who are conveniently gathered in a meeting about signing some surrendering documents. It is unbelievable how deeply indoctrinated these men are, because to them, even the slimmest chance at earning a slightly better life is worth gambling everything. If they die, well, the regime back home glorifies them as martyrs, and Kim still cashes in. This twisted pact suits Putin as well. Fresh records fill up front lines, bringing manpower shortages. The Kremlin might be losing nearly 2,000 soldiers a day at times, but if you can throw more bodies in, those staggering losses become a bit more manageable. Where does that leave the North Koreans? On the front lines of Kursk and other hot zones, apparently. They are trying to retake regions under tight schedule, or at least keep Ukrainian forces in place. But let's not deceive ourselves. Adding a few thousand poorly equipped, linguistically isolated soldiers will not turn the tide on this war this big. But honestly, guys, if you think about it, Kim Jong-un might be actually furious with Putin. Money for soldiers, the exchange of technology is all good. But remember that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that besides 10 to 12,000 soldiers, there are also around 500 officers and several high-ranking generals. They are very unlikely to participate in direct combat, at least hypothetically. Instead, they will be receiving extremely valuable experience of modern combat. The tactics, the machinery, the equipment, everything. Just so that one day they come back home and share this knowledge to actually bolster the power of the North Korean military. But knowing that Russians do not care much about sending even some officers in mid-assaults, I will not be surprised if those North Koreans ended up in trenches as well. The ones whose task was to learn and absorb as much information as possible are now dying because they have never seen anything like HIMARS before. Was it a bus for them, or was it just a regular armored vehicle? They will probably never know. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below. For example, my Patreon, where these videos go in early access, and then there is also an additional chapter of ridiculous Russian propaganda in the end. All the other means to support my work, once again, the links are down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims are all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe